live. There we go. No longer
All
amateur hour.
all right, we had a little bit of an issue there, but welcome back to the Chabinet Meeting. It's been about a week and a half, 2 weeks. There's been a lot of craziness going on, as there always has been. We have some interesting things going on in the world of the new Biden administration here, obviously, with where we live in the United States. We also have some crazy things going on with the stock market, with GameStop and a few other stocks. Wall Street Bets is making a mess of the stock market right now, but there's some interesting things that we definitely want to talk about.
Yeah, can you
But
explain what the heck happened with this jammy stock? Like, I'm just looking at the crazy. Like, you don't have to explain the whole thing, but roughly.
I think we will briefly, but I also want to say something that's even bigger is we have a new addition of a new member here to the group. So we're definitely going to bring that up. I am the department chair.
I am the cabinet,
And I am G Money, aka the Gavel.
And so we now have a gavel, and not a
Hear
physical
you.
gavel.
as
Yeah,
promised, as prophesied.
as prophesied. The physical gavel, thank God for eBay, is in the mail.
In God we trust.
So that is on the way. And I mean, just to talk briefly about the stock market, I don't want to go into details. It obviously is all over the internet at this point, but there are a number of, I would love to say how they self-describe themselves, entertainingly. They, at Wall Street Bets, have sort of, see, I can't even say the word I want to say because they like the stock. You'll notice the possible sense of sarcasm in my voice. They like the stock of GameStop and as well as some others like Naked Group, AMC Theaters and Entertainment, and there's definitely a few others.
Oh, AMC is big.
Yeah, I mean,
AMC
but
is
they're
always big.
yeah, they're big, but I know they're partially owned by China, but they're really
Okay.
close to being bankrupt. They had a lot of issues.
Huh.
But that's probably why they were being shorted so badly by a number of different entities on Wall Street, which is why Wall Street Bets, as well as others, had jumped on this bandwagon to execute the shorts, as some of them have said, to go after that group. And they made some nice money on that.
Right. So some people have been saying, oh, it's like rich versus poor. It's like they're getting back at these guys from 2008 who abused people. And look, there were a lot of bad things that happened in 2008. I think it's more just like that's the game. You want to play the game where you can end up in a barrel with suspenders, then sometimes that's going to happen to you. And yeah, it's a little funny when it happens, but
Right.
it's like that's what you play.
Yeah, the little guy won out, which is very, very rare. And some of the memes and the videos out there are absolutely hysterical. But there's also a lot of people that think that these individuals from Wall Street Bets, as well as others, are just like, no, they broke the system. No, these are young kids in their 20s and people in their 30s and even younger, who made a few dollars, and a lot of them were giving money, back to charities. I saw videos of people buying Xboxes and PlayStations and games and taking them to children's hospitals. So a lot of good was
Oh, that'll drive down the price of my computer parts over the next month or so.
um,
I'm just lamenting that the cost of computer parts has tripled in the last month,
Yeah, of course.
and it's not going to come down anytime soon.
yeah.
Just
So
like that.
yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff. But mind you, some of those people were also throwing money at, like, I guess the best way to describe it, those advertisements you see at the beach where you have a plane go by and there's all the letters behind, and they were just saying "Hold GME, hold," going over Los Angeles and stuff.
Some people were having a very good time, and some professionals appear to have gotten their hands caught in the cookie jar. They had gone head over heels and reached a little too far. Essentially, they took a bigger risk than was prudent, and some people noticed.
Right. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. There was one thing, Gavel, that you wanted to bring up with you're saying some of the students and a rapper.
Definitely. I have this thing with the rappers. They're millionaires. They're trying to make their money. This one guy, Little Uzi, he just got a pink $24 million pink diamond pretty much implanted on his forehead.
If I Google this, am I going to find it? Little
You're
Uzi.
going to find it. Little
I
Uzi.
I have to do
And,
this
and,
too.
and he
I don't know
is
why I misspelled Uzi.
very happy about this. He said he saved a couple of years to get this done. So it was a goal of his.
So now he looks like Vision from the Marvel era, right? Is that his plan?
Oh,
Like that's what he
oh
wants?
man,
Uh,
that's
Possibly.
that was harsh, but like I can't deny that was a
Well,
sweet
I
phone
mean,
call.
I don't know if that's harsh. That might be like the goal. It's hard to.
Could be.
He's got a lot of other permanent body modification. It appears.
Yes. Of course.
Um,
Yes,
yeah,
he
I'm
does.
not sure.
I
Can't say
I
it's
guess
working
you
for him.
know this is an investment for him, and the best way to have it on him is on his forehead. You know,
Everyone's
like
got to
his
see
third
it.
eye.
I mean,
That's a choice.
hey, Cyberpunk just came out. There's a lot of body modifications in that. We're clearly heading in that direction.
Well, I'm waiting for the
Yeah.
ink that I can change, so it doesn't have to be so permanent, right? I'm
You
waiting
mean?
for the Etch a Sketch
There we
tattoo,
go.
Oh my god.
where I can change it every day, or like have no tattoo, or move it over to that part of my body.
Yeah, just
Yeah,
shake it up and then start all over again.
right, exactly. I want to be able to control it from a computer too.
Feel it.
That would be pretty good. So until they've got that working out, and there's no ill effects or terrible side effects, I'll wait.
I'll just stay well away from all of that, and I'll be a square and an old head. Thank you.
I'll definitely be a triangle. I will not be nowhere near that.
No,
But hey,
I'm
to
not
be
anywhere the part where you're actually like cutting open your skin to put a precious stone in. Yeah,
Precious stone.
it's
Come
definitely
on, it's
tough.
a precious stone.
I've
I
considered and never followed through with one tattoo, a piercing, something like that. Never did it. But
I want to hear that phone call when he called a surgeon. Like, this is what I want to do. Can you just imagine that phone call?
that
But
surgeon was thinking dollar signs.
Right.
I'm
I'm going to be the
sure.
first person ever to have done. I will be the only one that offers this service.
Right. And that's how I see it as. No one has ever done it, so he's like, let me be the first.
Right, he's fueling the economy,
There we go.
There you
single-handed.
go.
All right.
Fantastic. Hey,
Stimulate.
So,
if he wants to do it, it's his body. He can do what he wants to do.
Free
well,
choice.
my like cultural thing today, I guess, is that the Gavel sent me a link to Uncle Tom, filmed by I think Larry Elder was heavily involved in the
Yeah.
making of the film. Now I know a lot of these black conservatives, and I didn't see the movie because I didn't want to pay for it. I'm a cheapskate,
That's
and
right.
because let me see if I can find it. I can find the IMDb. Oh, here's the movie's website. Okay. So, and these conservatives, they don't know how to make a movie and make it free and publicly available for all and get it taught in the school systems or something. That's a skill that their political opposition have. But so they charge for it. So it's like, but I'm happy to say, having seen it, it was way better than I thought it was going to be. The production value was way higher than I expected. And I know a lot of these people. Like I know Thomas Sowell and I know, Walter Williams. But
Candace Owens.
yeah, Candace Owens.
Mhm.
And so I know a lot of their stories already. But
Herman
Herman
Cain.
Cain, I didn't know everything about his story, and that was really impressive. And I just like the way
I
that
agree.
it was shot, where you just had these people sitting there talking to you and explaining, their life experiences. So neat
Really
movie,
think you guys should go check that out. Definitely,
and yeah.
it's very enlightening. A lot of information there.
Yeah, I'm very excited to try to get an opportunity to watch that and check it out. I haven't had an opportunity yet, but I watched the trailer. And I'm like, oh, this is so neat because I love seeing different cultural point of views, even if it's not a foreign culture. The cultures in urbanized environments, different states, different groups. There's always something fascinating as to why that's there, and this is one of
Right.
those things where I want to see.
Well, I just figured this would be written off as purely political, but it seems like it may have some cultural legs, and that would be good.
Right, and I mean that's why we always explore a multitude of different perceptions because that's why we talked before. I listened to Jimmy Dorn. He is the far, far, far left, but there's a reason why that group exists. Why do you feel the way you do? And that's why we try to remain as neutral as we can, so we understand those perspectives.
All right. Well,
This is true.
we have a lot to chew today, so let's get into it.
Let's unpack it.
I'm going to go ahead and share the screen.
So while the Chabinet there is getting the screen, he has selected an interesting article that all of us have read and dived into a little bit. Um, but I'm going to let you explain it first, as you were the first one to read it. And why specifically did you select this piece for the?
Oh, man. All right. So, if you'll recall from our very first episode, which occurred 3 days after the United States 2020 election,
Hmm.
we had been very reticent to come out with any kinds of accusations of impropriety.
Hmm.
Um, and I think we've been very, very careful not to get down some rabbit hole of believing that there was some conspiracy to manipulate the vote. We both agreed, and I think the Gavel may agree, that every election has some quantity of bad behavior, probably from both parties.
Agreed.
Um,
Yeah.
but whether or not that's actionable legislatively, legally, whether it's provable, is a whole other thing. And so you don't want to be quick to cry wolf,
Hmm.
because sooner or later, then that's going to make the whole idea of the thing illegitimate.
Right.
So, uh, but here we have an article from Time Magazine. If this was from Breitbart, it would be censored. It's an article from Time Magazine that says the secret history of the shadow campaign that, quote, saved the 2020 election.
Shadow campaign.
I mean, it's the sort of language you would expect to come out of a conspiracy theorist, like to come out of the mouth of an Alex Jones or something. Like, there was a secret shadow cabal that manipulated the election. But here it is being presented as a thing that actually happened from a very reputable source,
Right.
um, and as a supposedly reputable source, and as something to be proud of.
Hmm.
So it's just I viewed it as rather brazen,
Hmm.
but maybe you guys will have some other angles on it. So
Yeah, let's dive into it because there's definitely, from at least what I was able to read, I can see both sides where some of it's a little concerning, a little bit more than a little concerning. I don't want to say they're throwing ideas in people's faces, but things can be taken very different ways from a multitude of perspectives. So we'll get into it here. And yeah, do you want to lead off? We'll go right to
yep. As soon as I figure out what I did with the file, oh, there it is. Okay, people are gonna be able to root through my computer files.
it. Haha.
Looking at this.
There we
That's
go.
that's what I'm scared of, right? It's like, oh no, somebody will see a file name that seems wrong. Okay. So here we are. The Secret History. Illustration by one Ryan Ulbrich for Time. So you can see all of the imagery that we've seen over the last couple months, right up to the guy dressed like a Wagnerian Viking.
So the secret history, meaning what is this a secret of what we don't know? We don't know about this.
I mean, I think it's the perspective. They want to let you in on a secret, they want
Huh,
to let you in on what's going on behind the scenes that you, the average American, don't know.
Huh.
all right. Okay.
Um,
That runs
Mind you,
counter to my
yeah,
experience with Time Magazine.
right. But mind you, I think all three of us, to some degree, have discussed, not only just between ourselves, but we've watched and we're able to read between the lines of what is going on behind the scenes. But this, they're making this look like we're going to open the doors for you and show you everything that you have no idea about. Mind you, pretty sure there's some average Americans that are like, yeah, you're not really showing me anything.
Right.
All right. Well, let's see. So here's the first paragraph. One Molly Bali has written this. It was published in early February, apparently.
Yeah.
Um, all right. So actually, relatively recent. Apparently published, or at least updated, as of Friday.
Mm.
A weird thing happened right after the November 3rd election. Nothing. The nation was braced for chaos. Liberal groups had vowed to take to the streets, planning hundreds of protests across the country. Right-wing militias were girding for battle. In a poll before Election Day, 75% of Americans voiced concern about violence. Instead, an eerie quiet descended as President Trump refused to concede. The response was not mass action, but crickets. When media organizations called the race for Joe Biden on November 7th, that was actually the day that we published our first video. Jubilation broke out instead as people thronged cities across the U.S. to celebrate the democratic process that resulted in Trump's ouster.
Um,
Chaos.
yeah, I don't know. Always the and again, framing the media a little bit, as most of the media is a little bit more left leaning than right. I think we can say that with some certainty. Right wing militias.
Well, yeah,
Everything,
there's some framing here, and yeah,
right, yep, everything right wing militias.
Yeah, we know who the target audience is.
right. So I don't think we need to, I guess,
Yeah.
lambast them too much for that. That's just par for the course. But yeah, it's worth noting.
Mhm.
What else is worth noting is like there was a celebration, a jubilation of
Jubilation.
the
I like that word.
democratic process. I, I saw some celebration from those for whom that their preferred candidate won. I don't think I saw jubilation for the democratic process. I think there was much concern about the legitimacy or even the perceived. If you think that everything in the election was completely fair, you were still concerned that day for the fact that half the country perceived it perhaps to be unfair.
Mhm.
Um, so I didn't see celebration of the democratic process itself on November 7th, but perhaps my memory is limited.
There
No,
was
there
definitely
is.
some concern. I didn't see
Yeah,
celebration as well.
yeah,
Cabinet.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I agree. Like I said, I think there was a lot of celebration of Biden victory from people who wanted Biden to win. I'm not sure there was celebration of democracy.
Right.
there's certainly some individuals who more than likely did not vote for Joe Biden who are concerned at well, we don't either. Some of them believe that this was a complete ruse and that this was a fake, but I'm sure there's a lot more of them. The majority of them, they're like, something doesn't feel right. Something's maybe fishy or off, and
Right.
it's
That is to say, for me, the eeriness continued.
exactly.
But I certainly remember people feeling like, okay, it's done, the nails in the coffin.
Right.
Um, but so we'll proceed.
Yeah, I mean,
Second thing,
I don't mean to jump in, but I
no, you
will
go
say
ahead.
there are, well, Seattle and Portland, there are still things burning over there. There are still, mind you, those are the far left leaning groups.
Mhm.
Even on the day Joe Biden won, they were still protesting in Seattle and Portland. They were still going bonkers. Mind you, they had signs saying, Joe, we don't want Joe Biden, we want a revolution. So you can
Oh,
see where
okay. Well, that story was no longer
relevant,
enshrined
needed.
in the media
Mm-hmm.
because it was no longer helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So a second, well, we're going to get into that. So I
Yeah.
guess I keep getting the cart ahead of the horse here. Second odd thing happened. Amid Trump's attempts to reverse the result, corporate America turned on him. Hundreds of major business leaders, many of whom had backed Trump's candidacy and supported his policies, called on him to concede to the president something felt amiss. It was all very, very strange, Trump said on December 2nd. Within days after the elections, we witnessed an orchestrated effort to anoint the winner, even while many key states were still technically being counted. In a way, Trump was right.
Oh, that was bound to happen. Corporate America turns on everyone.
Yeah, I think so. I think corporate America is spineless, and if it hasn't been proved by the fact that the NBA now kowtows to China and doesn't admit that Hong Kong is a place, um, I don't know what does. Demonstrate that for you.
um, might as well get in good with the new, the new president and the new group that you have there in Washington, because they're the ones that are going to be throwing money at you, or at least be your friend. So why
Right.
would you want to
So,
not be?
what you're saying is that the oldest profession and the second oldest profession naturally align.
Well, if you want to go that route, yes.
Yeah.
In this case,
That is, those who sell themselves naturally align with politicians.
yes,
Naturally.
yeah, yeah.
Um, there was a conspiracy unfolding behind. There was a conspiracy unfolding behind the scenes. If I came out as my official name, right, my real name in the real world,
Your
and
government.
published on social media, or published in an official document to my coworkers, signed and sealed and sent to my boss as well, or something like that. That I believe that there was a conspiracy around the election, I would be excommunicated. I
Yes.
believe that. But
I
Time magazine can publish those words.
because it's Time Magazine.
Right, of course. Okay. Once that both curtailed the protests and coordinated the resistance from CEOs. So a conspiracy both curtailed the protests and coordinated resistance. Both surprises were the result of an informal alliance between left-wing activists and business titans. The pact was formalized in a terse, little-noted joint statement of the United States Chamber of Commerce and the AFL-CIO. You guys know who the Chamber of Commerce is?
Oh, this is
Enlighten me, cabinet.
Uh, it is not a government organization, even though it sounds super official. It is.
Privatized.
It's a lobby of big private business interests.
with big private money.
Yep.
Right.
Do you know what the AFL is? No. All right. It is. It is the. It is the unions. It is the American unions. So it's very, very weird for those to be like they are strange bedfellows, and correctly the article points that out. So
I will say, when you type it into Google for giggles, the first thing that comes up is the Australian Football League.
yeah, sure.
Are you sure it's not them?
No.
I'm sorry. Go on.
You know.
I had to. I'm sorry. But
No.
yes, I read this and I can't help but
Both sides.
I can't help but laugh a little bit at the union that is being formed here, and the article making it sound like this would have been impossible in any other instance.
All right, Gavel, you got to keep us on track because we're gonna get bogged down. You go ahead and
Move on.
you want to read the rest of this page aloud?
I mean, it says what the handshake between business and labor was just one component of a vast cross-partisan campaign to protect the election. An extraordinary shadow effort dedicated not to winning the vote, but to ensuring it would be free and fair. That's I like fair, credible, and uncorrupted.
Okay.
Right? For more than a year, a loosely organized coalition of operatives scrambled to shore up America's institutions as they came under simultaneous attack from a remorseless pandemic and an autocratically inclined president. Okay. Though much of this activity took place on the left, it was separate from the Biden campaign and cross
Cross ideological lines.
thank you,
Yep.
with crucial contributions by nonpartisan and conservative actors. The shadow campaigners were desperate to stop what was not a Trump victory. It was an election so calamitous that no result could be discerned at all, a failure of the central act of democratic self-governance that has been a hallmark of America since its founding.
All
An
right.
hallmark.
So they're claiming that this secret conspiracy was not a conspiracy to make sure Trump lost, but that it was a conspiracy to make sure that the winner would be clear.
Or that democracy, from their perspective,
Fair and free
voting
election
identities.
would occur, right?
Right. It's a secret shadow campaign to ensure that democracy was being protected. As forgive me, but I can't see it as being threatened as much as some people on the left claim that it is. I also can't help whatever I hear. When I read this section, I've read this section like 3 or 4 times. I can't help but think of the quote from Kennedy, where he talks about, or quote, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. Like, it just doesn't.
Right. If you're doing good things, why do you need to do them in the dark?
Right.
And that's pretty much what's being claimed here. Is something was done in the dark, and it was for everyone's good.
Right. So just that makes me annoyed. If you are so sure that you are on the side of the right, why must you hide your actions?
This is true.
Okay. All right, we'll proceed. For Trump and his allies were running their own campaign to spoil the election. The president spent sorry, I couldn't help it. The president spent months insisting that mail ballots were a Democratic plot and the election would be, quote, rigged. His henchmen at the state level sought to block their use, while his lawyers brought dozens of spurious suits to make it more difficult to vote, an intensification of the GOP's legacy of suppressive tactics. So they're going to claim that, and they have claimed, that not wanting mail-in voting is the same as, I don't know, a literacy test to vote.
Unfortunately, yeah, that's what they're going to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
While his lawyers brought dozens of spurious suits to make it more difficult to vote, an intensification of the GOP's legacy, and also framed here, right, that the suits are spurious, right? None of the suits could have possibly been legitimate. I wonder if that's a consequence of how the cases were decided, or a consequence of anyway. Intensification of the GOP's legacy of suppressive tactics. Before the election, Trump plotted to block a legitimate vote count, and he spent the months following November 3rd trying to steal the election he'd lost, with lawsuits and conspiracy theories, pressure on state and local officials, and finally summoning his army of supporters to the January 6th rally that ended in deadly violence at the Capitol. Deadly violence. How many people died at the Capitol that day?
What was the number?
Well, no, one initially, 5.
So the one lady was shot climbing through a window.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
There was one lady shot by climbing a window.
And like 3 people died of heart attacks?
No, there was a security guard that was injured and died later. One person had a heart attack. I think he got tased.
Uh-huh.
I know I'm missing. There's one I know I don't remember. There was another one. But one was by force. The others were, I mean, I guess you could argue to some degree accidental, except for the security guard.
So just to clarify, nobody died in peaceful protests over the summer, right? Mostly peaceful protests?
Many people died.
Okay. So those were mostly peaceful, and this was deadly.
There's things again I can't help but wanting to mention.
Go ahead.
His
Get it
henchmen. No, I'm trying to resist a little bit at the same time. So the whole thing, I can understand also, and obviously we were just talking about the point previously, I can understand why there are some that believe that mail-in balloting is sort of the wave of the future, it's what's needed, but every state is so unique in the way that it is done, and there's so many different things that can occur. How long will it take to count? Are people actually signing these documents? Do we have records? These are the actual signature of the individual you're claiming.
Right.
I mean, there's obviously a lot of Americans that think that the first thing that comes to their mind, oh, this is immediate fraud. No, I mean, I can understand there's fear out there because of the coronavirus. This had to be done, but could it have been done in a better way? That's the worry that I have.
Well, yeah, I think there are all kinds of perfectly legitimate critiques of mail voting. But we'll get into those.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we'll get into them now, and then we won't have to do it on the other side.
Well, I want to say I just got my mail-in ballot. Well, they want me to fill out this application to say, okay, yes, I do want to continue with my mail-in ballots. But now I'm sitting here like, well, actually, I don't want any mail-in ballots. I actually want to go to the polls.
I think most people do. Like most people who are, I don't know, civically minded want to go to the polls. There's something satisfying about pulling the lever.
Right. However, I understand travel, depending on where you live, that could be an issue,
Right, and so part of the contention is that there was already law in place in many of these states. Pennsylvania, for instance, I'm most knowledgeable about, that gave you an opportunity to say, you know what, I'm concerned for my health, legitimately concerned. Please send me a mail-in ballot this time.
Right.
What was done instead is that mail-in ballots were sent out en masse, whether or not people had requested them.
Right.
So that's the difference, and the reason that that opens the door for impropriety is that uh, you it is illegal um, to fill out a ballot for somebody else. It is illegal to pay somebody to vote one way or the other. How can you check that when it's being done by mail and the
Correct.
signatures aren't being matched?
So that right there needs to be looked over again.
Yeah, unfortunately, Trump's lawyers didn't seem to harp on that particular one. They thought they were going to get a much more sweeping result, and they were wrong.
They were.
But
Yeah.
for
Cabinet,
the
is there any way you
future
can go?
elections, yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt. Is there any way you can go back one for the
Yep.
slide you just had? Okay, no, then it's just something that. Oh wait, something that I missed here. The handshake. And go forward one more time. Yeah, there's one paragraph that was missed there.
Oh, my mistake. I could
Yeah.
well have missed one.
It's okay. I don't know if you want to.
I can
Go
pull
to
up
the
the
article.
actual article. Yep.
Yeah, their work touched every aspect of the election. Is the
Um,
first line.
okay. There we
There
go.
you go. So, and again, obviously talking about mail-in elections and stuff like that, but going back just for a second, I mean, they're talking about like these groups. They're openly saying to themselves that this organization that we're going into this article, quote, they got states to change voting systems and laws and help secure hundreds of millions in public and private funding. Um, did really many state laws need to be changed? Some did when it comes to the length of time because of COVID, as for counting votes. But at the same time, that is debatable. There were some pros and cons to both of those things, which is also one of the fears that a lot of people have about mail-in voting. That's things.
Right. So what you're pointing out is that the definition of this writer's idea of what is a free and fair election may very well be different from the definition of 70 million people.
Right. I mean, this writer is putting this on a pedestal like we change voter law.
And by the way, like there may be 70 million people on the other side who do think who agree with the writer that's
Right.
that's a good thing.
Exactly. So I just had to bring that up, but you can keep going.
But yeah, the impression that that any reasonable person would agree is or the implication that any reasonable person would agree is the unspoken lie. I feel right. It's not it's not what's present. It's what's omitted.
Yeah.
All right.
All right,
Yeah.
moving on.
The democracy campaigners watched with alarm. Every week we felt like we were in a struggle to try to pull off this election without the country going through a real dangerous moment of unraveling, says former GOP Representative Zach Wamp. I don't know who that is. A Trump supporter who helped coordinate a bipartisan election protection council. We can look back and say this thing went pretty well, but it was not at all clear in September or October that it was going to be the case.
Okay.
All right, so Zach Wamp is an American politician who was the U.S. representative for Tennessee's 3rd Congressional District from 1995 to 2011.
Okay, we've been around a long time.
Yeah.
And I guess there's something to be mentioned here, that something that I have to explain to a lot of our students a number of times, is that there's a lot of Americans out there that think that the entire Republican Party is just completely supportive of Donald Trump, except for those few who will speak out, which then they're highlighted.
I mean, this guy is listed expressly as a quote Trump supporter.
Right. But that just trying to gain ammunition for the article. Like, look, even his own supporters think what he was doing was wrong.
Clickbait. There we go.
Right, but secretly, and this goes for the Democratic Party just as much as the Republican Party, there were plenty of people who don't like the person they have in office.
So what you're pointing out is that there are of course Machiavellian maneuverings within the parties, and there are internal power politics at play.
Exactly.
Okay.
There's plenty of Republicans who use Trump or are using Trump as a scapegoat, and did for many, many years, and especially now that he's out. And I guarantee with Joe Biden, there's going to be plenty of Democrats that are going to do things.
Use him as the rump of anything that they don't want to be associated with, and then use him to advance their agenda as well.
Right.
So
It's too
that's
early yet.
normal enough human behavior, I guess. It's not the
Hmm.
Very
not the prettiest thing that humans do, but they do it.
yes.
All right.
Politics 101.
So,
Hmm.
Biden fans in Philadelphia after the race. Okay, clearly people were celebrating. Um, this is the inside story of the conspiracy to save the 2020 election, based on access to the group's inner workings, never before seen documents, and interview. I feel like I'm watching like a TV
Hmm.
special. Um,
You are. Go
I feel like where's who was the guy who opened Al Capone's safe,
on.
and then there was nothing in it. Um, anyway, John
Yes.
Stossel? No, it wasn't him. It was.
There's a few other people.
I'll remember eventually. Um, it is the story of an unprecedented, creative, and determined campaign whose success also reveals how close the nation came to disaster. Every attempt to interfere with the proper outcome of the election was defeated. Co-founder of Protect Democracy, which is a nonpartisan rule of law advocacy group.
Nonpartisan.
I bet you could, and I encourage people to go look into where Protect Democracy gets their funding from. Um, you may find that there are some very partisan individuals. But it's massively important for the country to understand that it didn't happen accidentally. The system did not work magically. Democracy is not self-executing. Democracy needs a helping hand.
God, no.
What?
No. No, it doesn't.
Right? Like, I mean,
No,
I don't. Like, I'm sure it's not as. That particular guy is not quite as nefarious as he is in my mind at this moment. But
mm-hmm.
that doesn't. You're not helping your case, dude.
It,
All right.
it almost came within disaster. What disaster? What disaster? What would the disaster have been? And democracy is not self-executing. Then who executes it? The people execute it, not government.
People can't be
Definitely not
trusted.
government.
I don't know. Yeah, it sounds unbelievably elitist.
I'll
And
stop because
yeah,
ooh,
just like you peasants can't decide who to vote for. Okay, that's what the participants want. That's why the participants want the secret history of the 2020 election told, even though it sounds like a paranoid fever dream. Yeah, it sure does. A well-funded cabal of powerful people ranging across industries and ideologies working together behind the scenes to influence perceptions, change rules and laws, steer media coverage, and control the flow of information. And I feel like we saw some of those things happening. They were not rigging the election, they were fortifying it.
Fortifying. Okay.
And they believe the public needs to understand the system's fragility in order to ensure that democracy in America endures.
if you read one paragraph of this whole story, you could reread that and just question it.
Yeah.
That paragraph, that entire paragraph, annoys me to no end.
Well, I mean, it's certainly like the most propagandistic paragraph.
I was just going to say that. And what does he mean when they say they were not rigging it? They were fortifying.
What he means is, well, you change your words, change your world, right?
There we go. I mean, I don't know.
Well, that's like that's like Stalin didn't kill people. He
Got rid of the criminals.
Yeah, that's right.
He
The
did
bad people.
criminals, so he didn't kill people.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
You're not going to the gulag. You're going on a trip. Okay. The Architect. Sometime in the fall of 2019, Mike Podhorzer. And by the way, what this is, this propagandistic paragraph, it's these people saying, okay, now we want a medal. Now we want a reward. Now that the result is beyond a shadow of a doubt, and none of these actions will ever be questioned again, now we will come out of the shadows and be rewarded for our service.
Yeah. Also, we were not rigging the election. Oh, you mean like when certain people were claiming that the Russians rigged the election in 2016? What's the difference?
Ding, ding, ding. There we go.
But that was the thing. Like when I said this, the article was brazen. I was saying like, how could they publish this and think like, your political opposition won't use this and say, hey, look, I think you cheated. But
Because they won.
They're not afraid.
Yeah, because they won, Cabinet. They
Right.
control
He who
the vast
controls
majority of media.
The past controls the future. He controls the present, controls the past. So now they control the past.
Um, the thing is, by doing this, though, mind you, this is obviously my own personal perspective, is they are fueling a large number of very upset and angry conservatives. I mean, there's some conservatives that are like, it's politics, it stinks.
No, man, I have friends who can't shake the idea that the voting machines were like. Can I say this? Or are going to get us canceled. I have friends who believe that there was sneaky evil code on the voting machines, or that they were internet access from foreign countries and stuff like this. And of course, you can't prove or disprove any of that.
Right.
Right.
Not without seeing the code, and that private company definitely isn't going to release it.
I mean, here we are. There are people on media organizations, obviously on YouTube and other places, that they can't just say, well, what if? Let's say, for instance, that maybe they were tampered with. Wouldn't it be a good idea to consider it? That maybe they should be investigated? You can't even say that without getting thrown off YouTube. How sad is that?
Right.
I mean, I'm not a.
Well, again, like if you want to solidify the legitimacy of the election, you should say, "Oh yeah, please look under the carpet, look in the closet. There's nothing there."
Let's make sure we got this right. But no, this is reminiscent of how many dictatorial regimes across, I don't know, history.
No. Trump's the dictator. These are the virtuous forces of democracy.
All right.
Right.
All right. So I'm being, yeah. Proceed. All right. Mike Podhorzer became convinced the election was headed for disaster and determined to protect it. This was not his usual purview. For nearly a quarter of a century, Podhorzer, senior advisor to the president of the AFL-CIO, in other words, longtime union boss.
Right.
The nation's largest union federation has marshaled the latest tactics and data to help its favored candidates win elections. Unassuming and professional, he isn't the sort of hair-gelled political strategist who shows up on cable news. Okay, so this is just like, am I supposed to be in love with him now? Is it going to be like he swept his hair back? Anyway, among Democratic insiders, he is known as the wizard behind some of the biggest advances in political technology in recent decades. A group of liberal strategists he brought together in the early 2000s led to the creation of the Analyst Institute, a secretive firm that applies scientific method to political campaign. He was also involved in the founding of Catalyst, a flagship progressive data company.
Okay.
So, big data being used for partisan reasons. Sensible, totally partisan. I don't know how he can pretend he's only interest is to protect democracy.
He is a campaign specialist, a political campaign specialist. But again, there's still a wide range of Americans that don't want to believe that. What do you mean my political candidate isn't like me? He needs a person to know what I'm thinking?
Oh, yeah. That's for sure. But, so that's all normal. Like, I don't want to get, like, riled up about it. What I'm riled up about is that he's being presented as this neutral actor.
Right. And you're right. Exactly. That annoys me. But go on.
All right. The endless chatter in Washington about political strategy, Podhorzer believes, has little to do with how change really gets made. My basic take on politics is that it's all pretty obvious if you don't overthink it or swallow the prevailing framework whole, he once wrote. And after that, just relentlessly identify your assumptions and challenge them. Podhorzer applies that approach to everything when he coached his now adult son's Little League in the D.C. suburbs. Of course, he lives in D.C. He trained the boys not to swing at most pitches, a tactic that infuriated both they and their opponents. Yeah, because it's disingenuous. It's like it's exploitative.
You're going to
play
go
the
after
game.
the Little League?
Yeah, play the game. Don't exploit the game. Anyway.
Play the game. Cabinet.
Teach your kids not to swing.
Swing at every pitch. Come on.
You could avoid some pitches. He told them not to swing at most pitches.
Of all things we're going to go after,
All right. It's just like slimy. All right. Trump's election in 2016, credited in part to his unusual strength among the sort of blue-collar white voters who once dominated the unions, correct, prompted Podhorzer to question his assumptions about voter behavior. Oh, what sort of conclusions did he reach?
Mm.
He began circulating weekly number crunching memos to a small circle of allies and hosting strategy sessions in D.C. But when he began to worry about the election itself, he didn't want to seem paranoid. It was only after months of research that he introduced his concerns to his newsletter in October.
You want
Uh,
me to say paranoid? Okay.
the usual tools of data analytics and polling would not be sufficient in a situation where the president himself was trying to, quote, disrupt the election. In other words, the polls were going to be off again. And it looked like these union guys were going to keep quiet about their political views and then go pull the lever for Trump.
Right.
All right. And that was obviously most distressing to him. Most of our planning takes us through Election Day, he noted, but we are not prepared for the two most likely outcomes: Trump losing and refusing to concede, and Trump winning the Electoral College despite losing the popular vote by corrupting the vote process in key states. All right, look, the first problem I would agree would be a problem. Like if Trump genuinely lost and then genuinely refused to concede, that's a problem. And clearly he flirted with that.
Mm-hmm.
But
He poked at it.
I'm sorry, you don't like the Electoral College?
Yeah, I mean, there's that. It doesn't expressly come. Well, actually, it does expressly come up, sort of here, but let's. I don't know if we want to step on the electoral college.
Okay. So he indicates that somehow the only way that Trump could win the Electoral College and lose the popular vote is if there was some corruption involved.
See, and that's something interesting. As you see, the left right now always reinforces the idea that, oh well, yeah, the Republicans can win the electoral college. They'll never win the popular vote again.
Trump
Which is
came within a couple 100,000 votes, maybe less. I think
right,
less than 100,000 votes of winning
Right.
the Electoral College if those votes were in the right states, right? Those 6 states that ended up flipping on very, very tight margins.
right.
That's the way
But
the
that
Electoral College works.
right, but it's being weaponized in this instance. I've seen it all over the place where they're weaponizing it continuously. That the popular vote will always be won by Democrats, and that is ammunition and a reason to continually get rid of the electoral
Do you think
college.
this article is partly just like stumping for that? Like, look, we did this
Um,
thing. Now let's make sure we never have to do it again.
I mean, you could say that's the beginning. That's maybe the flame turning on to light a
I
fuse.
mean, you've got
Maybe.
50 and a half votes in the Senate, don't you?
Hey, they were talking about making Puerto Rico a state. There's talk about it.
So
There,
pack the Supreme Court, make Puerto Rico a state, and add D.C. along with it, and then get rid of the Electoral College, right?
I could see Puerto Rico becoming a state. I cannot see DC becoming a state. That's ludicrous. There's rules. There's reason why it was never a state to begin with.
Yep.
But before we step off this, the way these two paragraphs are being framed is to sort of say that this man came up with this idea to make sure the election was secure, and he went above and beyond to do that. Whereas me, being politically savvy, I'm like, oh, this guy was being paid for political strategy by the Democrats.
All right, so that's self-evident. What does the Gavel think?
I think that the Electoral College is in process for a reason, and I agree with it. Okay.
Mhm.
We do have some corrupting voting things going on, but however, this has been going on for centuries. This is not a
It's not a uniquely American problem, right?
Right.
Right? It's a civilizational problem.
this is not new at all. So you know,
All right,
my thoughts on it.
It is
proceed.
an imperfect system created by imperfect people.
Right.
All right. Turns out poor Podhorser, I can't get his name right. I keep wanting to change it.
Pod Horser. Don't forget the R. Otherwise, you call him some sort of Canadian.
I keep wanting to call him like Pornhauser. I don't know what I want to call him.
Yeah, Hoser.
I'm thinking of iPod. I don't know.
Yeah. Potty
Oh,
was the only one thinking in these terms. Wasn't the only one. He began to hear from others eager to join forces. The fight back table. Well, I thought fighting is inciting insurrection, if you want to say that you're fighting. All right. A coalition of resistance organizations had begun scenario planning. around the potential for a contested election. A gathering of liberal activists at the local and national level into what they called the Democracy Defense Coalition. Voting rights and civil rights organizations were raising alarms. A group of former elected officials was researching emergency powers they feared Trump might exploit. Protect Democracy was assembling a bipartisan election crisis task force. It turned out that once you said it out loud, people agreed, and it started to build momentum, says Podhorzer.
He spent months pondering scenarios and talking to experts. It wasn't hard to find liberals who saw Trump as a dangerous dictator. Oh, yeah. But Podhorzer, right, was careful to steer clear of hysteria. Okay. What he wanted to know was not how American democracy was dying, but how it might be kept alive. The chief difference between the U.S. and the countries that lost their grip on democracy, he concluded, was that America's decentralized election system couldn't be rigged in one fall swoop that presented an opportunity to shore it up.
So he couldn't. America's decentralized election system can't be rigged in one fell swoop, partly because of the Electoral College.
Exactly.
Right.
All right.
Yeah. Again, this is a political election analyst doing his job, and this writer is glorifying that this.
Is he doing a good job? That's my question.
I think he's doing a good job for his client.
Right, which is the Democratic Party.
Or at least his union, or whatever. Yeah.
Well, they said liberal, progressive group that he works for.
Those are the exact words.
Right.
Right. So, yes, how democracy be kept alive. Again, where was it dying? I mean, I know where a large number of liberals will say, oh, well, he was suppressing things. Okay, before the election, where was it dying?
On Twitter, where voices were being silenced.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Right.
Oh, God.
All right. Nothing to see here. Moving on. So,
say that.
The Alliance. On March 3rd, Podhorzer drafted a 3-page confidential memo titled "Threats to the 2020 Election." Trump made it clear that this will not be a fair election, and that he will reject anything but his own re-election as fake and rigged. Nobody's ever done that before. On November 3rd, should the media report otherwise, he will use the right-wing information system to establish the vast right-wing information system, which is what, like Rush Limbaugh and Fox News?
A few other small people.
Sean Hannity? I don't know who that is. All right.
There's a few of them out
Tucker
there.
Carlson? Okay. On November 3rd.
Reporters, right? Supporters.
Right. Should the media report otherwise, he would use the right-wing information system to establish his narrative and incite his supporters to protest. The memo laid out... It couldn't be that his supporters would see information and protest of their own accord. It would have to be from the top down, right? The memo laid out... Meanwhile, this organization is entirely spontaneous and pure grassroots, right? No AstroTurf.
Right.
Here.
Right. You're reading my mind, like, because in the beginning of this article they said that Joe Biden is not involved at all. He's mentioned one time, and it never comes up at all in the rest of the article. If you noticed, he hasn't come up at all. But yes, this is grassroots. Meanwhile, anything erroneous or horrible comes from Trump down. Right.
Right. Okay. The memo laid out 4 categories of challenges: attacks on voters, attacks on election administration, attacks on Trump's political opponents, and efforts to, quote, reverse the results of the election. Then COVID-19 erupted at the height of the primary election season, and opportunity struck. That's how I read that. Man, everything was going so bad. Look at all these evil things Trump wanted to do. And then a shining ray of light. COVID. Normal methods of voting were no longer safe for voters, or the mostly elderly volunteers who normally staff polling places. But political disagreements intensified by Trump's crusade against mail voting prevented some states from making it easier to vote absentee and for jurisdictions to count those votes in a timely manner. chaos ensued. Ohio shut down in-person voting for its primary, leading to a minuscule turnout.
Yeah.
Like, primaries always have small turnouts.
Right.
A poll worker shortage in Milwaukee, where Wisconsin's heavily Democratic black population is concentrated, left just 5 open polling places, down from 182. It couldn't be that the governor of Milwaukee had any influence on that, right?
No, of course not.
Is the governor of Milwaukee?
Cabinet.
Okay, I'll move forward. In New York, the vote counting took more than a month. We gotta move. You're right.
You don't have a gavel yet. I'm gonna throw down. Oh, the virus is bad, so let's only have 5 polling stations open so there's more people condensed in one place. Why would we not have double the number of polling locations so there's less people? Why? Sorry, I'm throwing pens. Go on.
They're gonna be wearing a mask.
Right. They had masks. Suddenly, the potential for a November meltdown was obvious. In his apartment in the D.C. suburbs, Podhorzer began working on his laptop at his kitchen table, holding back-to-back Zoom meetings for hours a day with his network of contacts across the progressive universe. The labor movement, the institutional left, the Planned Parenthood and Greenpeace coalitions, resistance groups like Indivisible and Move On, progressive data geeks and strategists, representatives of donors and foundations, state-level grassroots organizers, racial justice activists, and others.
This reads like a comic book.
Does it?
It
Only
does.
when I read it. In April, Podhorzer began hosting a weekly 2.5-hour Zoom. Yeah, you want to take a shot reading for a bit?
Where are we at?
2.5-hour Zoom.
2.5-hour Zoom. It was structured around a series of rapid-fire 5-minute presentations on everything from which ads were working to messaging to legal strategy. The invitation-only gatherings soon attracted hundreds, creating a rare shared base of knowledge for the fractionists, as I said, progressive movement. At the risk of talking trash about the left, there's not a lot of good information sharing, says Annette
Shanker Osorio?
Osorio?
Who's got a name like that?
Yep.
Whatever.
Shanker Osorio. Yep.
A close Podhorzer friend, right, whose poll-tested messaging guidance shaped the group's approach. There's a lot of not invented here syndrome, where people won't consider a good idea if they didn't come up with it. I think.
All right. So Inception. We have to plant this seed in all these different various progressive groups, that some of which are legitimately grassroots. Otherwise, they won't believe it's their own idea. That's not AstroTurf.
In other news, political analyst strategist doing his job again.
Right. Okay. The meeting.
I'm sorry. I'm going to keep
that's
saying
great.
It's just there. That's what it is.
The meetings became the galactic center for a constellation of. You're right. It is a comic book.
Oh, I love this language.
Of operative Star Wars now, across the left, who shared overlapping goals but didn't usually work in concert. The group had no name, no leaders, no hierarchy, which, by the way, means nobody can be held accountable for anything.
but they were being
But it kept
paid.
the disparate actors in sync, right? Like terror cells.
God, please.
Pod played a critical behind-the-scenes role in keeping different pieces of the movement infrastructure in communication with and aligned, says Maurice Mitchell, a national director of the Working Families Party. Okay, that's like a union thing.
I'm going to look that up just for giggles. But
Yeah,
go
sure.
on.
I have no doubt that has everything to do with unions, or with organized labor. You have the litigation space, the organizing space, the political people just focused on the W, that is the win, and presumably not W. Bush. And their strategies are not always aligned. He allowed this ecosystem to work together. Protecting the election would require an effort of unprecedented scale. As 2020 progressed, it stretched to Congress, Silicon Valley, and the nation's state houses. It drew energy from the summer's racial justice protests, many of whose leaders were a key part of the Liberal Alliance, and eventually it reached across the aisle into the world of Trump-skeptical Republicans appalled by his attacks on
On
democracy.
democracy.
Trump says a lot of stuff. Not sure any of it could be construed as an outright attack on democracy itself.
No. Trump wants to help the democracy system. I mean, I strongly, I understand his frustration.
Well,
I know.
I don't think he's like an angel.
Oh, of course, I know he likes to rant on Twitter, and sometimes he needs to be censored.
I think sometimes he wishes, when he was president, he wished he was a king, but he knew the difference mostly.
He wished he was a king when he was a young child with a silver spoon in his mouth.
That's true
He
too.
wanted to be a king, but we understand his frustrations.
Yeah, he was a game show host basically for a period of time. That's really what his personality was.
Right.
Not saying it's great, but that's how he
So
ran
he was.
things. And in this case, that's what made him evil.
Right.
All right. Securing the vote. The first task was overhauling America's bulky election infrastructure. Bulky or bulky? I think they meant bulky.
Yeah.
America's election infrastructure bulks at your attempts to overhaul it. It should.
Yeah, but if it was,
Pandemic.
wait a minute, if it was not working before, why didn't we fix it before?
But he's arguing that it's not. So I really don't know whether or not this is a typo. Does he mean that the election infrastructure is cumbersome, as in bulk, which I assume what he meant, or does he actually mean what he wrote, that the election infrastructure bulks, that is, rejects and is contentious and cantankerous?
I'm going to say it's actually what you said secondly. I'm going to say it's that.
Okay. Well, it should. It should
Yeah.
bulk at his efforts. In the middle of a pandemic, for the thousands of local, mostly nonpartisan officials who administer elections, the most urgent need was money. They needed protective equipment like masks, gloves, and hand sanitizer. They needed to pay for postcards letting people know they could vote absentee, or in some states, mail in ballots to every voter. They needed additional staff and scanners to process ballots. Oh, so that's where the trillions of dollars they printed in the spring went.
By the way, that workers' party, I'm just going to say, I mean, mind you, I'm doing a little digging here. Even the world socialists of the world, who this is coming from,
The International Workers' Party
right?
of the world?
They call them opportunists, the WFP.
Okay, so they have some disagreements. It could just be that the WFP isn't socialist enough for the International Workers' Party.
Listen, when they're calling you opportunistic, that's saying something. But go on.
Okay.
On.
Benefit of the doubt, but
Yeah.
doesn't sound good.
Yeah.
In March, activists appealed to Congress to steer COVID relief money to election administration. Led by the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, more than 150 organizations signed a letter to every member of Congress seeking a $2 billion in election funding. It was somewhat successful. The CARES Act passed that month. Hey, look at that, $400 million.
Oh, there we go.
Money.
Went to masks for poll workers and
Right.
postcards informing people that they could receive a mail-in
Because
ballot.
we needed the postcards to let us know what polls to.
Moving on.
That is a lot of that was, and some of those were printed up in a way that included advertisements for this party or that party.
Right.
Like, how do you get away with spending the taxpayers' money on that? That should have been private campaign money.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Private philanthropy stepped into the breach. Oh, we did both.
Okay.
An assortment of foundations contributed tens of millions in election. Again, this is all normal. The Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. Zuckerberg can put his money wherever he wants. That's free speech.
Right.
The Koch brothers can put their money where they want. All right. Chipped in $300 million.
300.
It was a failure at the federal level that 2,500 local election officials were forced, to apply for philanthropic grants to fill their needs. They couldn't get Uncle Sam to pay for all of it. They had to turn to the party. Okay. They had to turn to a PAC. A former Denver election official who heads the nonpartisan national vote at the Home Institute.
Now, mind you, this Chan Zuckerberg is his wife.
Oh, okay. So it's just
So,
all Zuckerberg's money.
Okay.
Well, it's half
yeah.
her money, depending on how the prenup was arranged. Um,
Right.
so
Yeah.
McReynolds' 2 years old organization became a clearinghouse for a nation struggling to adapt. The institution gave secretaries of state from both parties technical advice on everything from which vendors to use to how to locate drop boxes. Local officials are the most trusted sources of election information, but few can afford a press secretary. So the institute distributed communications toolkits in a presentation to the. So again, like it's all fine except that I'm disgusted taxpayer money was spent.
Right.
Okay.
Someone has
Whatever kind of like agenda you want to pursue with your own money, it's fine. It's an agenda being pursued. I might disagree with it, but you're welcome to try and lobby people, whatever. Um, the institution's work helped 37 states and D.C. bolster mail voting, but it wouldn't be worth much if people didn't take advantage. Part of the challenge was logistical. Each state had different rules for when and how ballots could be requested and returned. Some of those rules were run roughshod over by the state Supreme Courts.
Mm-hmm.
The Voter Participation Center, which in a normal year would have developed canvases door to door to get out the vote, instead conducted focus groups in April and May to find out what would get people to vote by mail. In August and September, it sent ballot applications to 15 million people in key states, 4.6 million of whom returned them. In mailings and digital ads, the group urged people not to wait for Election Day. Vote early. Vote often.
They started 5 months prior. I swear.
Unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
And you wonder, like, I want to go back to the original concerns of the article for a moment. We're about halfway through. The original concerns of the article were that that the election would be somehow damaging, that it would not be clear the result, and there would be riots. And in truth, what's being done here, what's incongruous? Oh, right, they started raising the temperature 5 months early. Right, so if you're worried about how hot the temperature of the national conversation is going to get, why would you start early?
Why are you turning
Right.
up the heat?
To the
Why are
point
you the
where
one
5 months later, people are going to be literally foaming at the mouth
So they
Right.
can get out the
because
kitchen.
they're so sick of it.
So they can get out the kitchen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's disgusting almost.
All right.
Ugh.
Yeah.
The effort had to overcome heightened skepticism in some communities. Yeah, you think? Many black voters preferred to exercise their franchise in person, or didn't try. Guess what? Many white voters too.
Right.
How about many Americans?
Right.
But okay, well they're worried about black voters because they view that as a voting bloc that they can rely upon, right? That they've carved out that identity group and said these are guaranteed. And I guess statistically in large cities that may be truer. Although I think it was less true in this election than in before.
Yeah, it definitely was.
But so they're worried that black voters will want to go out and vote physically. Which Gavel, you voted physically
I
or
voted
mail?
physically.
You voted
And
physically.
I stand on the line for 4 hours, 3 hours.
Wow. I stood in line for about 45 minutes. I got my butt up early, and I live in a very small, like, little townlet that is
Right.
surrounded by much larger towns. So,
Right.
it's just like a couple of really old people working the polls. It looks like something out of the Twilight Zone almost in terms of like how 1950s it was. But and then they did have these Dominion voting machines, which made me feel a little sketchy. But I went ahead
Well,
and did it.
they gave us pizza, so I was kind of,
Oh wow, that's pretty good. Just for standing in line that long.
nice, good cheese pizza.
That's all
There
right.
you go.
That's what I was always taught when I was a kid making movies. They always said, "Look, you can't pay people because you're a poor kid making movies, but you better feed people,
Right.
right? If you expect people to stand around for you for hours while you get your shot, or where where this actor prepares their makeup or whatever, like you better have some pizza. That's like the bare minimum, and some coffee and donuts in the morning."
Right.
And it's like there's something to it. But yeah, so most people Chair, you voted in person.
I did. About an hour and 15 minutes is what it took. And
Right.
I'm, suburbia
Right.
where I am.
So
So,
typical America.
yeah.
Okay. We had different lengths of time, but we all got it done. It wasn't
Right.
it wasn't and
Yeah.
we're not in danger. I guess none of us is really really old, and none of us is like missing legs or anything. But
The
what's
grandeur. Oh, I'm. It's the grandeur of the process. At
Right.
least
Well,
that's something
yeah,
I
there
got.
is something to the pomp and circumstance of it. Actually, what I love about it is how little pomp and circumstance there is. You have when you're a kid, you think, "Oh my God, what's behind the curtain? It's the Wizard of Oz." You get in there, you realize, oh, it's just some nice older people who have been doing this a long time and want to make sure it's done fairly, and it
Exactly.
kind of shuffles along. It's so plebeian. It's like the cafeteria ladies who are running your voting system. Fine. That's what you want. It's one of the things that makes you realize, oh, it is us, the citizens, who run this country. So anyway, yeah, being denied that experience would make me upset. Nobody's talking about disallowing in-person voting, but they certainly ramped up mail voting. Okay, so they talk about this distrust that we have.
It was a bit of a confusion too. Was it that you can only mail in ballots, or can you actually go to the polls? Because
Well,
some
the
people
real
didn't.
question was how would they know if I'd done both?
Right.
And
And that was the thing.
it's an
That was the
unanswered question still. And if you ask it, you're a conspiracy theorist, unless you're Time Magazine.
it's a reputable source.
Yeah. God. Let's keep
So,
rolling. Let's keep rolling.
the litigation brought by the Trump campaign of a piece with the broader campaign to sow doubt among mail voting was making novel claims about using theories no court has ever accepted. Okay, so you got theories, and the courts rejected your theories, but some of the reasons the courts rejected things had nothing to do with the merits, had much more to do with the procedure, supposedly. They read more like lawsuits designed to send a message rather than achieve a legal outcome. I think that's entirely a fair critique, actually, of, oh man, the Brennan Center. I hate John Brennan. But it's a fair critique of some of Trump's lawyers. I think that, who is it, is it Sidney Porter? No.
Sidney Porter.
No, I somehow I confused Trump's
Sidney
lawyer
Poitier?
for Sidney Poitier just because the word
Yes.
Sidney is in his name. Um, but anyway, I think that Trump's lawyers, some of them were very much showboating and doing very little for him. But that's what happened. That's what happens when you are the TV celebrity king instead of a normal human. Sometimes the people you pick to be around you are more show than substance. In the end, nearly half the electorate cast ballots by mail in 2020, practically a revolution in how people vote. This was a very, very different election than any that we've ever had before. Half of all Americans voted remotely. But none of the three of us with our diverse backgrounds, although we all work the same job, so probably we're in the same income bracket, among other things.
Right.
None of us did. I don't know anybody who voted remotely. Well, I do know people in other states who voted remotely. New Jersey had much more remote voting than we had. Only a quarter of voters cast their ballots the traditional way. Do you know that we're in the 25th percentile? 75th, whichever way that goes. Disinformation defense. Bad actors spreading false information is nothing new. This is what we're doing right now, according to this article.
Right.
For decades, campaigns have grappled with everything from anonymous calls claiming the election has been rescheduled to flyers spreading nasty smears. But Trump's lies and conspiracy theories, the viral force of social media, and the involvement of foreign meddlers made disinformation a broader, deeper threat to the 2020 vote than ever before. Laura Quinn, a veteran progressive operative who co-founded Catalyst, began studying this problem for a few years. She piloted a nameless secret project. That doesn't sound sketch. Which she has never before publicly discussed, that tracked disinformation online and tried to figure out how to combat it. One component was tracking dangerous lies that might otherwise have spread unnoticed. But again, then you've got to ask whether Laura Quinn, a veteran progressive operative, is unbiased in determining what's disinformation and what isn't, what's a lie and what isn't. I'm sure I wouldn't be unbiased, but
You're definitely unbiased,
I have to be biased, right? I bet I would get online and I would end up finding something that I thought was a lie, and I would flag it as a lie, and I would see something I agreed with, and I would not. Right now, like, I have some friends to keep me in check and things like that, but no person could be unbiased. But it's being presented as like, oh, she flagged all the lies.
So it must be a lie.
So it must be a lie. We must believe Laura Quinn, a veteran progressive operative,
Who co-founded Catalyst.
a progressive organization, like, she's not biased. Researchers then, like,
What are you talking about?
oh my God. I mean, like, even if you were like a supposedly unbiased news, like if you were like, I don't know, who pretends they're unbiased, Brian Stelter or something, like, even then, research. But this person is openly a progressive operative.
Right.
Researchers then provided information to campaigns or media to track down the sources and expose them. The most important takeaway from Quinn's research, however, was that engaging with toxic content only makes it worse.
When you get attacked, the instinct is to push back, call it out, say, this isn't true, Quinn says. But the more engagement something gets, the more the platform boosts it, and algorithm reads that as, oh, this is popular, people want more of it, right? So the solution, she concluded, was to pressure platforms to enforce their rules, both by removing content or accounts that spread disinformation and by more aggressively policing it in the first place. The platforms have policies against the certain types of malign behavior, but they haven't been enforcing them, she says.
Okay, so you can't win your argument in sunlight. Right? The best protection against free speech is more speech. But you find out that when you start arguing with these people that you think are blatantly wrong, the article gets a lot of attention, and then, well, if you were winning the argument, that attention would be good, wouldn't
it? It's supposed to.
Okay, but instead you figure that's a bad thing, so you just want it taken down instead. And then you lobby Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and all the others to take it down.
Right.
Doesn't seem like the free speech position to me.
No.
Quinn's research gave ammunition to advocates pushing social media platforms to take a harder line. In November 2019, Mark Zuckerberg invited 9 civil rights leaders to dinner at his home.
Okay.
Where they warned him about the danger of the election-related falsehoods that were already spreading unchecked. Now, I believe Mark Zuckerberg was called before Congress. Was it in the summer or in the spring?
I don't know.
Maybe twice.
Maybe
I know at least once last year. I think at least in the spring, he was called before the Senate, and he said,
"Yes, I remember this."
In clear terms, no, we don't do that.
Right.
We don't censor anything.
But they do.
But they do. Well, what are 9 people doing at your home? Right? It took pushing, urging conversations, brainstorming, all of that to get to a place where we ended up with more rigorous rules and enforcement. How many of those 9 people do you think, how diverse do you think that group was in terms of political outlook or experiences in life?
I don't think any of them were. I think they were all one-sided, to be honest.
It would have to be, right? Like the way it's described. So, okay, just checking.
Right.
President and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, who attended the dinner and also met with Twitch CEO Jack Dorsey and others, of course. Gupta has been nominated for Associate Attorney General by President Biden. Oh, okay. You know, the person writing this article, I feel like they want to get theirs. They're like, hey, look, this person got their cabinet position. Where's mine?
I want to get mine. It's my turn.
Yeah. It was a struggle, but we got to the point where they understood the problem. Was it enough? Probably not. Was it later than we wanted? Yes. But it was really, really important given the level of official disinformation. that they had those rules in place and were tagging things and taking them down. And clearly we saw that happen.
Yeah,
And
time
everybody was
again.
like, okay. Are we allowed to talk about the Hunter Biden laptop chair, or is that forbidden on YouTube?
Hunter Biden's laptop.
Is that a forbidden subject?
I don't know. We could.
Did we lose the chair? We might have lost the
I think
chair.
I'm looking for the chair. Yeah.
We lost the chair. Oh,
Where's the chair? What happened?
oh, okay. Okay. Don't know.
The gavel has to other engagements in a couple of minutes too.
Oh goodness. All right. Perhaps we're going to end this here. I think there's enough that's just like unbelievable. It just seems brazen to me. That is all.
No,
we
yeah, the writer again is this. I'm reading this as it's a very biased. I mean, I get his points, a lot of his points, but however, this is all perspectives, you know.
Yep. So it's an opinion piece. Um, it just yeah, I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh, okay, this is the world I live in now, the world where people openly admit that they oppressed me, and
And
then
it's okay.
right, and then want to be rewarded for it.
Right.
Shut up, peasant! Help! I'm being oppressed. Shut up!
Don't say anything. We will take your tax money to make postcards, okay? And yeah. Oh my gosh.
Oh goodness! All right, I wish that was the worst of it. So it's been fun.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pull up my ending bit, and perhaps we'll find the chair again next week, and we'll get a story about what happened,
We'll
and
unpack
we'll
something
close out.
else.
So the chair and I have proceeded through Epictetus' wisdom, his Enchiridion or handbook. It's sort of like his um, bite-sized amount of wisdom, and we've been proceeding at a pace of one a week. We had recently reached number 8, so we're up to number 9, numeral 9. Epictetus is a Stoic. Do you know Epictetus?
Not
Gavel?
really.
Oh, okay, so he's this dude who was lame, and he was a slave in ancient Rome. And
Mhm.
his master had been a slave of Nero's,
Okay. Okay. No
which
Nero.
can't have been a good time.
Right.
And his master, according to some versions of the story, actually was the cause of his crippling. And his master apparently treated him quite harshly. And so when Epictetus tells you to quit your sniffling and man up and take it, it's hard to disagree with him because he had it really, really bad by most measures. But he's got some really insightful advice, so we've been going through it. All right.
All right. So our meeting's adjourned.
I'm going to read this, and then we're adjourned.
All right.
All right, number 9. Sickness is an impediment to the body, but not to the will unless itself pleases. Lameness is an impediment to the leg, but not to the will. And say this to yourself with regard to everything that happens, for you will find it to be an impediment to something else, but not truly to yourself. Oh, it's positive.
Nice.
All right, I think we'll adjourn.
All right. Meeting adjourned.
Excellent. Get you a real gavel.
Yes, I got to give me one.
All right.